This presentation goes with the StudySync lesson, Text-Dependent Responses. I'm Kathryn J. This is intended for my students at Horizon High School. It can be used to review the skill, or if the student was absent when the skill lesson was presented in class. To complete this lesson, open Short Constructed Responses in Google Classroom. You will need to have 3 windows open on your computer. One window for this video, the second window for the StudySync lesson, the third window for the Google Doc, Text-Dependent Responses. You'll know you've got this when you can answer, how do I use text evidence and original commentary to write an appropriate response? Pause this video and watch the StudySync Define video. When you have watched the StudySync Define video and read the information on the Define page, return to this video. By reading the definition of a skill or concept and discussing what we already know, we can set a purpose for learning the skill. Now that we've watched the video and read the information, let's think about this information. Take a minute to think about a piece of writing you have written in response to a text. What did the response help you understand about the text? Please pause this video and open your copy of the Google Doc, Text-Dependent Responses. You will write your response on the Google Doc because you don't have a partner to discuss your response. When you have completed your response to question number 1, please resume this video. Why is it important to include details from the text in your response? Please pause this video and open your copy of the Google Doc, Text-Dependent Responses. You will write your response on the Google Doc because you don't have a partner to discuss your response. When you have completed your response to question number 2, please resume this video. Please pause this video and open the Vocabulary tab in StudySync. When you finish, click Save and Continue. Then resume this video. Don't forget to click Save and Continue. The model section of the lesson has 2 parts. First, we'll learn the steps to identify and apply the skills in the checklists. Then we'll read the skill model to see how a reader applies those steps. Throughout your reading, you'll make notations to track the model's process of applying the steps to analyze the skill. These annotations will help you slow down your reading as you develop your knowledge of a skill. In order to use text evidence to support an analytic response, ask the following. What is the question asking? What parts of the text are related to the question? What evidence from the text might support my response? What language from the question can I paraphrase in my response? In order to write a text-dependent response, complete the following. Read the question. Think about what you already know about the text that will help you answer the question. Reread the question aloud, 1 sentence at a time if you're confused. Read and identify. Reread parts of the text that are relevant to the question. Identify passages, quotes, and details in the text that will support your response. Refer to your annotations for examples. Write and review. Use the language from the question to support your response. Cite one or two pieces of evidence from the text to support your response. Review your response to ensure you have answered the question in its entirety. Proofread your response, checking for any spelling or grammatical errors. In the story of An Hour by Kate Chopin, Mrs. Mallard has a revelation following the sudden death of her husband. Identifying and using text evidence will help you support an analysis of the text. Let's look at how one reader uses the text to respond to the question. Following his death, what are Mrs. Mallard's feelings toward her husband? After reading the question, the reader locates a moment in the text when Mrs. Mallard thinks through her emotional response to her husband's death. He uses text evidence to identify that Mrs. Mallard has mixed feelings about her husband's death. In the text, the reader highlights that Mrs. Mallard will weep again when she comes face to face with her husband again at his funeral. He also highlights the detail that she sees beyond her initial grief. The reader uses this evidence to support his analysis that Mrs. Mallard simultaneously grieves her loss and celebrates her freedom. He continues reading the story of An Hour and identifies additional details that reveal Mrs. Mallard's feelings toward her husband. In this passage, the reader locates and highlights another moment where Mrs. Mallard briefly considers her husband. He uses the phrase, "What could love, the unsolved mystery, count for?" to infer that Mrs. Mallard will not allow herself to be troubled by her relationship with her husband any longer. The reader uses language from the question and cites evidence from the text to support an analytic response about Mrs. Mallard. Let's discuss the model. How does the reader use evidence from the text to describe Mrs. Mallard's feelings toward her husband? Please pause this video and open your copy of the Google Doc, Text-Dependent Responses. You will write your response on the Google Doc because you don't have a partner to discuss your response. When you have completed your response to question 3, please resume this video. The example answer is, the reader points out that Mrs. Mallard describes contradictory emotions in response to his death. He shows that she is both saddened and excited by her loss. Compare your response to the example. How does the reader explain the effect of Mrs. Mallard's self-affirmation on how she views her marriage? Please pause this video and open your copy of the Google Doc, Text-Dependent Responses. You will write your response on the Google Doc because you don't have a partner to discuss your response. When you have completed your response to question number 4, please resume this video. The example answer is, the reader explains that Mrs. Mallard is no longer interested in devoting time to her husband. Instead, she will focus on herself. Compare your response to the example. How is writing text-dependent responses beneficial to the reader? Please pause this video and open your copy of the Google Doc, Text-Dependent Responses. You will write your response on the Google Doc because you don't have a partner to discuss your response. When you have completed your response to question number 5, please resume this video. The example answer is, writing text-dependent responses can help the reader demonstrate comprehension. The responses will be useful if the reader decides to write a more in-depth analysis of the text. Compare your example to the answer. Your turn questions are exactly what they sound like. They are your turn to show what you know. Before you answer the questions, review the Model tab to make sure you are applying the same steps the model used. Use strategies like process of elimination to help you select the correct response. When everyone has finished, we'll discuss the correct answers as a class. Now pause this video and open the StudySync Skills Lesson. Don't forget to click Submit Assignment when you have completed the Your Turn questions. After you submit the assignment, please resume the video. Don't forget to click Submit Assignment. In paragraph 9, it is revealed that there was something coming to her and she was waiting for it fearfully. Which commentary best responds to this text evidence? A. This text evidence shows that Mrs. Mallard has heart problems and is worried about having a heart attack. B. This text evidence shows that Mrs. Mallard is worried that a bird might enter her room through the window. C. This text evidence shows that Mrs. Mallard is afraid there will be another train accident. D. This text evidence shows that Mrs. Mallard's feeling is far from her usual experiences. In paragraph 9, it is revealed that there was something coming to her and she was waiting for it fearfully. Which commentary best responds to this text evidence? A is incorrect. Mrs. Mallard never herself expresses concern about her heart condition. B is incorrect. There is no evidence in the text that she is afraid of the birds. C is incorrect. There is no evidence in the text that she fears there will be another train accident. D is correct. Mrs. Mallard knows something is inevitably approaching her, but she doesn't recognize the way she is feeling. Which quotation best supports the reader's response that claims Mrs. Mallard dies from disappointment when she discovers her husband is still living? A. She knew that she would weep again when she saw the kind, tender hands folded in death. B. There was something coming to her, and she was waiting for it fearfully. C. There would be no one to live for during those coming years. She would live for herself. D. The vacant stare and the look of terror that had followed it went from her eyes. Which quotation best supports the reader's response that claims Mrs. Mallard dies from disappointment when she discovers her husband is still living? A is incorrect. This quotation would support the claim that she dies from the joy of knowing he did not actually die in the train disaster. B is incorrect. This quotation does not provide any context about how she feels about her husband's death. C is correct. Readers learn that she looks forward to living for herself as opposed to serving her husband. D is incorrect. This quotation does not provide any context about how she feels about her husband. If you have a question, please open the assignment in Google Classroom and post a private comment. This links the question to the assignment and allows me to better answer your question.